I can hear you loud and clear. Welcome, Chris Mauro, to the Boardroom podcast. Bright
How
and
are you,
early,
Bassmaster?
bushy-tailed, and ready to go. I'm doing well, my friend. Let me start off, Chris, if I can, by saying that I want to give the listener some context. You are the former editor of Surfer magazine. What years did you work at Surfer?
Let's see. I started in 98, left in 2008, and then came back in 2010 because the company I went to work for, which was a startup, we sold ourselves to the magazine group. So then it was like I came and ran digital for the group,
Hmm.
and that was until 2000, end of 2015
Right.
before. Yeah. So it's quite a ride.
Yeah.
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 Uh, And I think, yeah, you and I were there for the very early days of your podcast.
I chuckle because the dates you mentioned were pretty much the dates that I worked there as well. So you and I worked together for quite a long time. I apologize in advance for, for I think
Dude,
you
it's
were my
okay.
boss. I'm pretty
This
sure you were my
this is like a
boss.
3 cup morning. No, nobody was your boss. You were you had it pretty dialed, man. You had your own program going, and I loved it because, you know, there weren't a lot of resources for the websites back then. So you were doing like duct tape and dental floss. And you were always, I would say the best thing you had was you were the best at hiring interns. Like you
Yeah.
found Zach, you
Yeah.
found, a bunch of guys that were really, really good. And
Yeah. John Fowler is my attorney now. He's like a world-class
exactly.
attorney in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Zach
So,
Weisberg found the inertia and is doing great.
yeah. So, in
Yeah.
fact, Weisberg moved in right next to Don Craig in San Clemente.
Oh,
They're,
really?
yeah, they're next door neighbors.
Is that like by Cotton somewhere or something? Or
It's right up from Pedro's Tacos,
okay.
right there. Pretty
All
close.
right. Cool.
Good for him.
Well, so you spent some time there at Surfer, obviously, but people may or may not know this, but at one point you were a professional surfer.
Yeah, it was a brief flash in the pan.
Was that IPS or ASP?
It was ASP.
Okay.
Um, it was like 87 to basically 90, and then it was like Bud Tour heyday.
Right.
Um, uh, and then even when I was like my first job in the industry was actually a Billabong sales rep, and I was still repping and competing at the time because the Bud Tour was still paying good money, and it was super fun. It was
Yeah.
a fun deal.
Yeah.
The tour when I was on it was probably the least attractive it ever was. Um, it was like 30 stops, Najima, Newcastle, you know, Chiba, just all the Burleys and J Bays and all that stuff was gone.
Yeah.
So it was just, kind of a grind.
Pretty grindy.
Yeah. But still fun as hell. Like, just the experience of cruising to different countries. And back then it was a lot of camaraderie, a lot of sharing of rental cars and cruising with your guys and sharing rooms because nobody had biographers, videographers, agents. You
Yeah.
know, it was just like boys on the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what was it like with surfboards themselves? How many boards did you travel with?
Uh, I think if I traveled with, I don't think I ever traveled with more than three other than going to Hawaii. Hawaii, I think we bring like 4 or 5 boards,
Yeah.
but that was like a lot, like a 3 board bag was kind of all you did.
Yeah.
You had like a little bit of a step up, like if you went to Oz or something.
Yeah.
Um, and if you went to West Oz, you brought a little bit bigger board for Margie's. Um, I think I had like a 610 for Margie's,
Yeah.
you know? And now that's probably just a rhino chaser out there. It's like
Back then,
nobody,
was everyone going left too? Like nobody was even taking the right.
yeah, no, it was like the right was a total anomaly. Like,
Yeah.
you're crazy.
That's so funny.
It's so
Um,
funny. Yeah.
Stab Magazine, I don't know if you're aware of this, but they put out a cool little article basically saying, hey, there seems to be a shortage of high performance shortboard shapers. If you
Mhm.
look at the tour now, obviously much different than when you were on tour, there are, six or seven guys or brands, if you will. Biolos, Pizell, Marcio at Sharpeye, Brit at CI, JS, DHD. I'm probably missing one or two others that have the tour on lockdown as far
Yeah.
as high performance shortboard shapers. One, do you think there is, in fact, a shortage of high performance shortboard shapers? And two, if there, well, go ahead and answer number one and we'll see where that leads us.
I think that's you know, I never thought about it like that, but it kind of makes sense, you know. It, my question would be, if you go back to when I was on tour, you know, you had Rusty who owned like nine of the top 16 and Merrick who owned a few, a bunch. And so there's always been these dominant labels that have sort of owned the top ranks. That said, I think where what they're nailing is the fact that, more and more board makers are realizing that the culture on a whole is not interested in the high performance shortboard. This demographic that we're in, you and I are perfect examples, like pushing 60 and, riding whatever the heck we want. And I know kids who are in their 20s who do the same thing. They're not religiously shortboarders. And that's more just I think a cultural trend. I think it's like we're in this way more open society from a board acceptance standpoint compared to especially the 90s, when it was like your choices were, the Kelly Slater shortboard or a Becker,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, um, but my question was, is there a shortage of high performance shortboard shapers? Are these the only guys that can make a board for Jack Robinson?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I mean, I don't know. I'm one of those guys, like, it's funny because I hear you guys every once in a while talking about board design on your shows. And look, the close tolerance blanks are so good now, man. Jack Robinson could glass a freaking blank without even skimming a layer, put fins on it, and rip the bag out of the thing. Like, let's just be honest.
Totally agree.
You know what I
Totally agree.
mean? The
Yeah.
rockers are perfect. The rails are decent. And so, um, I would say there are a lot of people who can shape a really damn good shortboard. It's just the people who are committed to it and, going out there and selling themselves on it and that kind of thing.
Well, let's say there was a shaper, which there probably are, that are really good shapers and really good high performance shortboard shapers. And they've got to go up against this gauntlet, which is the six or seven or eight shapers I just mentioned. What's stopping them from breaking through? And like, let's say they have a dream, like I want to shape a board for a world champion. I'm a great shaper. I'm capable. I know I can do it. What do you
Yeah.
think is stopping them from? Is there ever like how does somebody, if in fact they want to, and maybe that answers my question. Maybe just nobody gives a shit.
No, I think if you point to any major shaper that's like successful in the shortboard thing, right? To me, it seems like the breakthrough part of their journey is they always have that one guy who breaks through. Pizell had John John. Before John John, Pizell was, you're there. He was one of many guys on the North Shore who made good boards. But John John, they had a working relationship and it did their thing. Al Merrick was pretty good before Tom Curran, but Tom Curran took him into the stratosphere. You know, Rusty was great before Aki, but Aki took him into the stratosphere. Um, I think you could kind of, Matt Biolis, similar thing. It's just like all these guys had one or two guys that just like kind of broke through and put them on the map, and then they just other people followed. That these these leaders, these influencers, I guess you would call them,
Yeah.
had other people who followed their lead, and they satisfied all those guys.
Well, I also have a theory that one of the things that these guys have that say, uh, I don't know. Shaper X. I don't want to throw anyone's name out there, but
Yeah, yeah.
let's say Shaper X doesn't have is an international distribution and factory situation where Kanoa, for instance, can fly to Bali and have boards at Sharp Eye there waiting for him. All of these guys have factories and distribution outlets around the world. So
Hmm.
the Shaper X is like, 25 and finally got a rider under his belt. He's got a guy that's broke through and he's on the CT.
Yeah.
He's going, well, all these other guys are they're riding the top 8 brands and I can get one like they're all over. And oh, by the way, they're also kind of hitting me up,
Yeah.
I'm going, hey, ride our boards. So I think there's a marketing hurdle that's huge. And I think there's a distribution and a build out situation that's a problem as well.
Yeah, do you think though, and you're more familiar with this than I am, but it's like the software stuff is there, right? Like a Kanoa kid likes his board. He could take that software anywhere, and I don't know how many sort of foamy Z's or Bashams there are down in Oz. I would assume there's quite a few where you can just get that thing spit out and have somebody finish it off.
Wow. And put Kanoa on there as your logo. You know what I
I don't
mean?
know. I
Just
mean,
like, yeah, just like, hey, let's be clear. There are surfboard brands out there that have never picked up a planer, and that's what they're doing. They're just
oh
spitting out
yeah.
designs and putting their logo on it.
Yeah. I mean, you and I were at the Maglet at a fun time when all that stuff was becoming brand new. I remember um, Eric Arakawa called me and he's like, dude, you have to come see this thing. And it was Luciano Leao's first, laptop design, shape your board on the laptop. And I remember telling Matt Biles and Rusty about it, and they were just like, "What do you think?" I'm like, "Dude, it's unbelievable." And it was, the first time I realized like we are going to start measuring cubic volume. Like this is going to be a thing. It's going to be on every board, you
Yeah.
know. And that was kind of revolutionary and just like, we've come pretty far with the sh surfboard shaping deal. It's
Yeah.
it's pretty crazy. And that then there was that period too. Remember when everybody was up in arms about surf tech and what they were going to do to the shaper, and everybody thought the shapers were threatened. And I think you and your show did a really good job sort of celebrating that artisanal shaper guy. And I don't know, I look around today and I think there's more shapers than ever, better shapers than ever, better glassers than ever. I just think the craft as a whole is, you know,
Yeah.
never been better.
Yeah. I would agree. I would agree. Well, anyway, it's an interesting thing. By the way, Stab did their due diligence. The actual meat of the story is 10 new shapers that you should keep an eye on, and they
Oh,
mentioned
neat.
5, and they're coming out with 5 others, and it was pretty interesting. But there are guys like there's a kid named Taylor Clark. He's not a kid. He's probably 35. Taylor Clark, who was probably should have been on the CT, red hot surfer, who's been mentoring and shaping under Sharp Eye. And a guy like Taylor is now, because of Sharp Eye's long web of influence, Taylor's meeting all sorts of guys. He's building boards for Kanoa. He's has factories around the world that he can probably go to and interact with these people. And he's building up, starting a career as the shaper for Sharp Eye as one of them. I'm sure there's more than one.
Mhm.
Um, Timmy Patterson's son, Kanoa Patterson, is a guy like this. Of course, Britt Merrick is a great example. Um, and so there are these guys that are, instead of forging their own path and going, hey, I've got Taylor Clark Designs over here, I'm going to do my damnedest to like break through the 8 guys.
Right.
No, I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to slide underneath an expert mentor under Marcio, who, by the way, who wouldn't want to mentor under him, and just become the guy underneath the Marcio brand, sort of like Rick Hammond with Rusty. And these guys have existed for a long time. It seems like that's the best model for a young shaper.
Yeah, I mean, John Carper was a Rusty guy when I was riding for Rusty back in the day. He would shape most of us our Hawaii boards.
Yeah.
Um, that models goes back to, you know, Bing and all his guys. It's like it's so it's certainly that's just the shaper's tree 101, right? Like that's probably the best way to get to get an education,
Yeah.
because you all those sort of, figures you're trying to attract are coming in the door, for that major label guy anyway. You're introducing themselves, you're meeting them that way, and it's a great way to build a relationship.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Okay, so switching gears a little bit. SHACC, the Surfing Heritage and Culture Center. You have some role there. Tell me about your role at SHACC. Let's start there. And also, by the way, Chris, the listeners probably need a little debrief on what SHACC is. Give us, because I know you and I are very close to it, but maybe we're too close. Why don't you give us a 30,000 foot level?
So SHACC is a Surfing Heritage and Culture Center. It opened its doors about 20 years ago when you and I were at the magazine. I think you and I were on the very first oral history committee with Paul Holmes, right when they opened. And really, their mission is to preserve, protect, and share um, sort of surf history and surf culture. Um, and they do it by uh, really just, it started with a board collection. Started with Dick Metz and Spencer Crowell getting together. They both had incredible surfboard collections, from Duke boards to Blake boards to Simmons, Quigs, all the way down the line to the 70s and 80s boards. Um, but then it's also they're trying to preserve photo libraries. They have full collections of all the magazines, movies, everything. Um, and they've been sort of at it for, 2 decades, as you know, and they've been up in this kind of warehouse building up in San Clemente, behind the high school, which is not necessarily a consumer-facing destination, but it was somewhere where they can at least get these things together, get the stuff organized, hire an archivist, that kind of stuff. These 501(c)(3)s, as you know, are not like the easiest things in the world to manage. So um, they've been kind of just plodding along for a while. And, there was really sort of like early on, they were always saying, we really want to try to get this thing into a more consumer-friendly destination. But, finding a building and a location that can house stuff, that is consumer facing was not easy. And then anytime there were opportunities, it was like, is the money there and all that kind of stuff. Well, long story short, what's really cool is after 20 years, um, Dick Metz, who's the OG founder, um, basically he found a building in downtown Laguna Beach, like you could throw a tennis ball to the sand, a 12,000 square foot building that wasn't for sale. But the guy, they convinced him to sell it, and he did. And so the whole shack operation is going to be moving to downtown Laguna to a very wonderful consumer facing market, sometime, early 2026.
Wow. So
Yeah.
that's the big news is that
Yeah.
SHACC is finally has a public facing location to properly fulfill its mission. And really, I mean, you and I both huge fans of the receptacle, the stuff that they have, like the stories that they can tell are just incredible. And so it's exciting times for anyone that's ever been associated with SHACC to see this mission really coming to fruit, to bear fruit here. So congratulations to SHACC. Where are we with like opening day for the is it a museum? How are we categorizing SHACC? What's the official like do we go to see do we go like is it time to go to the museum, you know?
Well, I think it's definitely sort of museum cultural center, but there's no question that this new venue is going to be a fantastic event space, as well. There's going to be a very large screen in there. It'll be able to handle some stuff. Um, they're going to have you know, full beer and wine stuff, the whole deal. Um,
Yeah.
so it's going to be a lot more immersive than the current version of SHACC. And experiential, I would say. So that's exciting. and you know,
Food and beverage, food and beverage.
not food and beverage, but beverage. You know, there'll be like a
Coffee.
little bar and stuff. Yeah, there won't be food. I don't
Right,
think. I don't think that's
right,
in the cards. Maybe
right.
maybe a Scott Bass vending machine or something.
So, so coffee would like it seems because obviously everyone looks. I've been on the board for I have been for enough long enough to realize that this needs to be a business. Like
Oh yeah.
we have to turn some revenues so that we can keep the doors open.
Well, the
Um,
private label opportunities alone for just some retail part, and then yes, some beer and wine, all that kind of stuff for events and everything is totally on the table.
yeah,
Um, so all that is fair game. It's going to be, this is going to be one of those places where when people do book signings or movie tours or podcasts, you guys are going to want to come up there and do it from there.
yeah,
There'll be a
yeah.
stage for you to come and do your show,
Right, right.
which will be
Cool.
really cool.
Yeah. Well, David and I used to do our show from the library there in San Clemente.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah. We would
Yeah.
actually occasionally, the doors wouldn't open at Shack, and we would literally do our show in our trucks in the
No way.
parking
In the
lot at Shack.
parking
Oh,
lot.
yeah. In the parking lot, we'd be on, and then like Barry would roll up an hour late from San Onofre and knock on our window and be like, "Hey, I'm here." Oh, Lord.
Barry is a national treasure, man. Like
He is.
we just did a Ron Stoner opening on Saturday night. It was
Yes.
the Stoner exhibit. It was amazing. Like 20 of Stoner's family members were there, and this is the closest thing they've really ever had to a memorial. His
Wow.
two sisters, a bunch of his nieces and nephews, and it sold out in a couple days. And what was amazing was they dug up a bunch of stuff, and Paulette, his uh, old girlfriend, gave us some imagery, and Barry, he went through fine-tooth comb photoshopping the dust off of these photos, 1,400 stoner images, a lot of them that had never been seen. That exhibit will be up for a few months. It's insane. And anybody who's familiar with Stoner's library, it's like there's something about his photography that just is so magic. What he captured of like that 60s era, those photos of blacks from the cliff looking down where it looks like guys are flying on their longboards, that kind
Yeah.
of the skip fry at the ranch stuff, all that kind of deal.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I heard that that was a great event. I heard that you did a great job as the master of ceremony. So congratulations.
Oh, thanks.
Tell me
Yeah,
about what's the one thing that I would learn about Stoner that I didn't know?
it was crazy because what what some were surmising was they think Billy Hamilton, his other friend Jeff Crothers, who grew up surfing with him at the ranch and stuff, and took him all these places. They were like, he was so detail oriented, and he was so soft spoken, and just a tad awkward. Like he might have been on the spectrum,
Yeah.
you know. And his sisters, they didn't push back on that at all. They were just like, could be, he was just so friendly and nice. Never saw him get angry or anything like that. And then the other thing that was sort of interesting was Billy Hamilton was like, I saw him in 1984 on Kauai.
Maybe we should back up and tell the listeners a little bit about sort of Ron Stoner's passing or what we know of him.
Yeah. So Stoner was, just to kind of give the debrief, was he was this guy. I think he grew up in like Pasadena and everything, fell in love with surfing and photography right at the same time when he was about 14 years old. By the time he was 17, he was on the masthead of International Surfing Magazine, which is one of those early ones. And then Severson convinced him to come over to Surfer. Actually, he went to Severson first, and then Severson kind of bought in. Severson even says, and his first meeting was kind of awkward, which is another sort of evidence piece of that whole deal. Um, and within just months, Stoner was dominating the magazine, and there was a stretch where he had like six covers in a row of
Yeah.
Surfer, and it was that sort of mid 60s just heyday of surfing's innocence, and he just nailed it. And I think one of the reasons why is because if you think about your early days of surfing and your early days of photography, he had such fresh set of eyes, and he kind of took everybody along on this journey of like what draws us to surfing. Like if anything, his photography captures that. Usually the surfer is a little smaller in the frame, and it's about the whole deal. It's not like
Hmm.
reduced down to the maneuver or something. Um, but he also captured great personality shots. It's just his stuff is such a window into that world. Um, and then what happened is, he started late 60s when things were getting gnarly. He dabbled in LSD and immediately started having episodes. And the treatments back then that they thought were the right treatments, like electroshock therapy and all that kind of stuff, um, they tried all that stuff. And I don't didn't really work, and he took off to Hawaii, and then he just slowly disappeared. He was just like it was just random sightings, and then they never saw him again. And it got to the point where the family, when his father died, I think it was in the 90s or maybe even before that, they had to deal with the probate stuff, and so they hired a private investigator and everything. Um, in fact, I think their dad actually did that before he passed, but to try to locate him, and the trail was dead, and he just went missing.
Wow.
Never,
Full
never saw him again.
disappeared, just
Disappeared.
disappeared.
Just this
And
complete
legally
mystery.
was written off as a missing person that is presumed dead.
Missing person presumed dead. Exactly. That's the official status.
And
And
then tell me about Billy Hamilton running into Ron Stoner in 1984.
he was like, I saw him on Kauai. He had this boat that he was going up this river on, and I tr was tripping. I goes, "That's Ron." And Ron was telling me about his little boat, and he told me he was going up the river, and very apocalypse now. And and he goes, and that's the last time I saw him. And the family. I was watching the family's reaction in the audience, and they were looking at each other like 1984. Like
Yeah.
they were all
Like
just
we
tripping
had
out.
written him off years before that.
Oh yeah, they'd written him off in the
Yeah.
70s.
Yeah.
And so um, all those things
So
are
this is
really
still a
strange.
mystery. I mean, there's
Such a mystery.
potential that Ron Stoner's still amongst us somewhere.
That was one of the questions I asked at the end. I said, "Well, would it surprise any of you if he just walked in the door?" Like,
Oh my God. That's a good question.
you know,
What'd they
and
say?
it's just like, it could happen. I think if you think about it, and I was talking to his niece, and I go, if you're autistic, you're kind of in that hermit zone. And he could just be just socially isolated. But, you would think somebody's got to know where the guy is.
Yeah, somehow it's just, I mean, it's
Such a
almost like you
mystery.
have to work at that. You know what I mean? Like that's a job to kind of
Yeah.
stay anonymous like that on that level. And so I don't know.
Yeah,
Interesting.
you're 100% correct. That's especially in this day and age.
Yeah.
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 Um,
Well, that's a really fascinating story. Now, Ron Stoner, didn't he get tied up with Rick Griffin a little bit?
yeah,
He and
they
Rick
went on a
Griffin
bunch
were
of
kind
trips
of
together.
buddies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Interesting.
funny. So yeah, that was like, kind of golden era of the mag, you
Yeah.
know. Um,
Yeah.
there was a lot of those, but I mean, it was sort of the um, pre loss of innocence. It was the innocence days.
Well, speaking of loss, you know what I'm concerned about? And maybe I'm just like old man, get off of my lawn guy or something like that. But I'm concerned that young surfers don't um, have a real sense of history regarding this stuff. Like I'm afraid that the Ron Stoner story just is going to disappear. Now, I was thinking about this the other day and I started to do some self-reflection. And I'll ask you to do the same. When you were 16 years old and you were just red hot frothy surfer, just like we all were when we were 16, how much history did we really know? Like we kind of knew, I knew Tom Curran, I knew current stuff, but if you asked me about David Nueva. I knew the name. If you asked me about Duke Hanamoku, yeah, I'd heard of Duke Hanamoku. But so I guess my question is, Chris, um, do you sense that our history and our culture is sort of being eaten from within because of social media and the state of the way we get our information these days? Or am I wrong? Am I just an old man screaming?
Um, I think a little bit of both. I think today's generation actually has a lot deeper knowledge and respect for history than our generation did. Mainly because when you and I were coming up, the boards were evolving so fast, and we were all just like so squarely focused on the future, trying to make those things work, right? Um, and that is really what propelled the birth of the Pro Tour, and the Pro Tour was a bunch of surfer shapers out there having a space race. And we were all just like enamored by it. Our generation was. And we didn't give a crap about what was going on 5 years before, you know? Um, it was all about the now and where are we going? And the 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 interesting thing, and I was asking Matt Warshaw about this and stuff too, is I honestly think that what has opened the window to the past and really what sparked it was the surfboard. It was like, look, when Kelly took the boards to their skeletal extreme and we had to start looking back to go forward, that's when people started discovering history. And if you think about the timing of that, that is right around when SHACC started. That is right around when the Surfer's Journal started. That is right around when all this, like, looking back at where we've been began. And so we're 30 years into a surfing renaissance right now, and it's wonderful. And we're just getting started. You know what I
That's
mean?
amazing. That is such a great insight that Kelly Slater pushing board design to the place it went in, say, 1993.
Hmm.
And wow, all of a sudden we were forced to.
Yeah.
He made us, we were almost going to be body surfing again. The
Yeah,
boards were
totally.
so bad
Yeah.
that, that he made us go, hey, what about the fish? Steve List was on to something.
Yeah. I mean, Kern tried to get us all on skimboards for a while, but that didn't work. Um, but like, but yeah, I mean, it was just, once that box was opened and we started going back and, um, rediscovering the list fish, and then it was, all these other things, it was just like, boom, it's just been flourishing. And, you know, I think it's so exciting today when you look at all the different types of people who are making a living at surfing without a jersey on, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
from Mason Ho and Mikey February to, Devin Howard, who's surfing better than he's ever surfed.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So it's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
It is cool. Um, when we think about looking back on surfboard design, you and I had a discussion. We didn't even get into it, but it was I think it's a great thought experiment, which is so people that don't know, when you go into SHACC now, the Surfing Heritage and Culture Center, there is a board timeline. It is chronological, and it starts probably in like 1820 and moves
Mhm.
its way to 2020.
Yeah.
Um, and you and I were talking about the 70s timeline, the specific era, the decade of the 1970s. What boards need to be on that timeline?
Yeah.
And um, I'll let you start. What's the first board on that timeline?
Well, I mean, you have to have like that classic Lopez pipeliner board, you know, from the early 70s, right? Like you have to have that. And then you have to have the Campbell Brothers Bonzer. You have to have an IPA Sting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you have to have a list fish.
Yeah.
You have to have, then you'd probably even get in later to an MR,
Yeah.
refined 20.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
I
after
mean, I think
that,
that's pretty much it.
yeah.
There is one other board that I think has to be on there, and that's the Johannesburg World Title winning board. It was a Bing Karma, and I'm trying to remember Arnett, Rolf Arness.
Oh, Ralph
That
Arness,
was
yeah.
1970 that he won the world title,
Right.
and it was a Bing Karma. And I just think that it's a good way to start the timeline because it certainly was like almost the end of an era, the
Yeah.
end of the competitive ISA world title type of vibe.
Yeah.
Granted, there were, of
72
course,
was the absolute end in San Diego. And
right.
then that was the meltdown. 70, there was already like, the Australia one, you read the narratives of that one. There was already a lot of complaining going on in 70.
Yeah, a lot of
Uh,
Nat Young going, I'm just going to roll a joint and split.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But what's so strange about Rolf Ernest, I mean, Rolf Ernest in some ways is like he's kind of like that Ron Stoner surfer guy. Like he just disappeared after that. And he's still around. I think he's in New York or something.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
But um yeah, that's an interesting one. I always I always kind of look at it and like go, how much adoption was there of that design, you know,
Yeah.
um, to figure out if it belongs in the timeline type of thing. Um,
Yeah, my sense is that it's belonging in the tie line if we were to make the case for it, because I see where you're going.
yeah,
And again, I would make the case that it's actually kicks off the timeline because it was like the end of an era. Like it's the
yeah,
beginning of the end of the era
yeah, yeah,
of like competitive surfing, and their 70s are just kind of dry from,
yeah.
at least the first half.
Well, I mean, the early 70s, if you were, all the innovation, Hawaii was such the dominant factor of the culture in the early 70s because that's where everything it was like the fact that guys were figuring out how to ride deep behind the tube. Like that was just game changer, and that's why we all went to the movie theaters and we're just like, oh, you know, and we were all spellbound by that. And a lot of us had a tough time, giving up our puka shell necklaces until like 1980. Like Laguna Beach High School, there was hippies through the mid 80s. They were diehards. Like they did not want to give up on Lopez, until late. So, and then you had like, which was funny was when the twin fin thing started coming in, you had this really clash of cultures because Laguna was sort of this retread thing, but we're right next door to Newport, and Sean Stussy lived in Laguna, and he was shaping little boothy like these just super modern, crazy airbrush twin fins that were so ahead of their time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Stussy became just like the hottest thing at our school, not just boards, but his t-shirts and everything, which are still,
Yeah.
today. It's like that
Yeah.
logo's still there. My son's at UC Davis, and he had no idea that Sean Stussy was a surfer. Like
Yeah.
he's like, Dad, have you ever heard of Stussy? I'm like, yeah, Stussy.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting about our list, and I'm not going to, I look at it and I think, okay, maybe it's a little bit North America centric
Yes.
because what board? There's one board that perhaps we could squeeze in, and I feel like we might be crowbarring a little bit here.
Hmm.
Is a Michael Peterson three wing sort of dagger pintail. Because Michael Peterson was such a force in the 70s in Australia.
Yeah.
I think to not include him in a timeline is to suggest that we just forgot about, or we're North America centric.
Well, and this goes back to like, the other thing about that shortboard revolution, which, McTavish and all that, but the other guy that gets completely overlooked is Midget Fairley because Midget and those guys, there was this rift, between them. And Midget somewhat got overshadowed by the historical narrative. And he was absolutely making state-of-the-art shortboards at the exact same time and ripping the shit out of them. And that part of the equation should get represented, but it doesn't. That fits in the 60s, not so much the 70s,
Right, right.
because they were making those things early.
Yeah.
Um, and
But MP,
Yeah, MP would be legit. I'm not as familiar with what his board designs were, and was MP was never like a production shaper, was he?
no, no.
Yeah.
But I mean, he had a surfboard label. He would make
What?
these surfboards. That's how he made his living.
Was it?
I mean, in 1971 in Australia,
Are you
that was
sure that's how
that
he
was
made his living?
part of how you made a living. But that three wing dagger pintail thing is super sexy.
Yeah.
But It
I mean,
just
he was so
feels
ahead of
like
the game too.
something from Australia needs to be on that timeline. It can't just, well, there is the MR twin fin.
What about the Wayne Lynch sort of evolution thing? Was that 60s too? That was like
Yeah.
67, 68, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I feel like, yeah, between Wayne and Michael, you know, the Australian narrative is does definitely needs to get some,
In your timeline, there needs to
yeah,
be a board that's something early mid 70s.
yeah,
And
that
maybe
and
it's a Terry Fitzgerald. Maybe it's one of those beautiful, which brings me to another board that could crowbar into your timeline, which is that idyllic wave airbrush vibe that Jack Myers and Bill Stewart put on OP surfboards that were like POP units inside surf shops. That vibe you could crowbar in. It's going to be eye candy for the guy walking into SHACC and checking it all out. And I don't know, am I crowbarring a little bit?
no, not at all. I think one of the things that you have to consider, like, look, Shaq, especially in this new location, it can't just be a graveyard of surfboards. I love Spencer Crowell. I did an interview with him, and the way he put it was great. He's just like, cultures have all these different spokes on the wheel. There's the art, there's the literature, there's the craft, there's uh the movies, the photography, all of that. And that's we need to basically keep all that in mind, and it's like what belongs in a 70s timeline, you know, the urethane skateboard wheel certainly does
Yeah.
because it's
Yeah.
like that was a game changer, you
Yeah.
know. um, and the skateboard itself, you know, and what was going on. So it's just you have to really sort of open up that thing a bit
Yeah.
and help tell that story and that art you're talking about was a huge part of it. It was like
Yeah.
it was the eye candy.
Yeah. Well, for sure. That's what's so fun about sort of what Barry does and what you guys do there at SHACC is the ability to excavate and come up with really great exhibits that are a lot of fun. There's a Ron Stoner one you mentioned. Um, I guess it's on display for a number of months now.
Yeah, it's going to be basically it's the last exhibit at the San Clemente location. So come check it out while it's up. It should probably be up through the end of September.
And tell me about what is it going to look like at the new facility? Is there how
Uh,
similar is am I going to be am I going to see the same not that there's anything wrong with it, the same board timeline? Like what's the footprint look like from a design standpoint? Or maybe it's not vetted yet. Maybe it hasn't been.
that is like there are meetings constantly like going on. There's little committees and stuff. I will tell you that I went up with Jeff Alter and Greg McGilvery to go check out a bunch of screens and screen technology. If you ever get a chance, you should go up and see the California Surf Club up in Redondo that just opened. It's not a museum, it's really just more of a venue. But they did a really great job of it's sort of like an outrigger canoe club on steroids in terms of like there's all these cool little rooms. They've got those screens that look like pictures when they're on the wall, when they're just frozen, like it looks like a painting. Um,
Mm,
but then you could run video through it and all that kind of stuff.
mm.
Um, so, I think the I think one thing you can definitely expect is that it'll be more immersive than the current version of what's going on. Um, the big thing is there's all these boxes that we want to check. You have to be able to kind of move things around to make room for events and this and that and whatever. So that's all being fleshed out right now. Jeff Alter is just unbelievable servant leader guy. Like he was, you've seen a lot of leaders at SHACC, and I've never seen one that's in there sanding the walls before an exhibit and hanging stuff, that's the type of person he is. And
Yeah.
then, busting out spreadsheets and CAD designs and all this kind of stuff because, he's got some home flipping in his background. And so he's one of these guys who likes to move fast.
Right.
And
Cool.
and so, he's just a fantastic leader. And then, that new board that they're energized. It's Paul Noddy, it's Randy Hill, Mark Christie. It's a lot of guys that have been around for a while and like to see things get done.
Yeah. Good. Well, sounds exciting. I'm looking forward to I guess there'll probably be a grand opening of some sort, right?
Yeah, yeah, there definitely will. That should be fun as soon as there's a date, you'll be the first one to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, good. So what else is going on in your world, Chris? I know that we've got the 100 wave challenge coming up.
Yeah, that's a big one. And you you were the one who introduced me to Joe Sigurdsson years ago. And Joe is just like, you know, the sweetest human ever. And being up here in Orange County, that event had been going on for like a decade. And I th I think you recall last time we chatted about this was like, when we were at the magazine, there were so many little events and people always hitting you up for their charity things, and you're always trying to figure out like which one is legit and where's the money going and all that kind of stuff. Um and so you could never and sometimes you could never get a straight answer. And so uh when you do your due diligence on the 100 Wave Challenge and what Boys to Men is and the impact that they're having on these kids' lives. I mean, they're literally saving lives every day. Like,
Yeah.
and when you save lives, you're saving your community. It's just that simple. And so to see the San Diego surf community um, really rally behind an organization like that every year is just so heartwarming. And when you meet Joe, who's not the best marketer in the world, like he's just so head down saving lives that he doesn't really have the bandwidth. And what's neat is that, he's got a really good team around him now of people who are helping him start to scale. COVID was tough. COVID was a tough deal for those guys when the schools shut down because they do after school sort of group mentoring programs and all that stuff. They had
Yeah.
to go totally virtual for a while. There was the one year where they weren't even sure if they were going to be able to do the 100 Wave Challenge. But what was cool was, we talked about just pivoting and making it your 100 Wave Challenge and opening it up all over. And it ended up being the biggest year they had. Um,
Right.
and so our goal this year is to sort of try to break that record, um, raise the awareness a little bit, um, tell some more stories about the impact these guys are having. And when you meet these kids, and well, they're adults now. A lot of these guys have graduated from the program and they're running things now. And these are
Yeah.
kids who were, I mean, they honestly had a death sentence.
Yeah.
A lot of them, like, third generation gang member. Joe, there's this one guy, Jose, he was like, he's basically the point man, like the hit man. He's the guy who IDs who you're gonna take out,
Yeah.
and just completely turns his life around.
Yeah.
And there's so many of those stories that are just mind-boggling. And we're as a society, like there are so many rudderless young men out there without dads. And
Yeah.
when you don't know, I mean, we're lucky because we have the lineup, and you and I, like, even if we weren't getting around with our parents or something, there's always somebody there in the lineup to kind of guide you either this way or that way. And um uh but when you're in the inner city, your only option sometimes is just like a joining a gang.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's amazing, right? Boys to Men Mentoring, they take at-risk youth and give them mentors, adult males that can kind of get them on the path and keep them on the path and demand some accountability. And it's really what young men strive for. They're really hungry for it. They might not even realize it, but they need it and they sense it. And so the 100 Way Challenge is a way to raise money for the Boys to Men Mentoring Program, and um, it happens each and every year in the fall, right? September into October, I
Yeah.
want to say.
Yeah, it's in September. Um, and so we'll be doing some cool storytelling around that event and we'll start hyping it probably in the next really few weeks here. You came down, we interviewed you, we interviewed Bird, we interviewed a bunch of guys who've been involved. And we're so appreciative, you and uh let's see, I think you were one of the first people to sort of blow it up on the radio back in the day. And
Hmm.
so Joe still talks about what a huge boost that was just to get recognized. You and Baldy, I think we're talking about it on the radio show.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
We were. Yeah, Joe would call in, and we would chit chat and have a good time. It was good.
yeah, and it's like you, I hope you understand, Bass. Like you guys saved so many lives just by that little gesture. It does not take a lot to do this thing. You come down, you don't even need to catch 100 waves. You just go and you show up and you do your thing. And it's such a minimal effort and has such maximum impact. And that's what's so amazing to me. It's like there's not that many things that you can do where you could see the results just tangibly. And,
Yeah,
and this is one of them. So it's like I'm so grateful to, guys like you and Bird and these guys who've just been doing it. That whole Degree 33 surf squad over there,
yeah,
like those guys are just unbelievable. Like
yeah.
every year they raise like at least 40, 50 grand somewhere in there.
Amazing. That's
It's
amazing. Yeah.
it's so crazy.
Degree 33 surfboards.
Yeah.
So, what's the call to action here, Chris? Before I let you go, how do we get people signed up for the 100 Wave Challenge here?
So you can go to 100 challenge basically.com. And there's a few different ways to participate. You can sign up and say I'm doing the 100 challenge. You send an email out to your friends and family. You say donate to me, and I'm doing this thing. Um, That's one way. The other way is you start a team and you get a bunch of people to do that. So it's like, hey, Bassy, the Boardroom show, let's start a team for the Boardroom show. And each person goes and sends to their network. And that whole team raises money, which is what the Degree 33 guys do and a number of others. And then the easiest way, if you don't want to do any of that, is you just donate to somebody. Find somebody to
Mhm.
donate to. So there's three ways to participate. There are people in years past, like John's been a good supporter. They have a Hawaii chapter over there that they split some of the revenue with that John did. It was really cool. John was like throwing video clips, of his 100 waves, which was just insane, and
That's cool.
it was super cool. So, to see the people step up and take part in these things, and look, there's a lot of good ones, but this is just a great one, and it really does save lives. So,
Yeah.
super easy to get involved, whatever level you want to get involved.
All right. Cool. Catch 100 waves, raise some money for Boys to Men. It's a great concept and a great organization. All right. Well, what else, Chris? Anything else before I let you go? What have we forgotten to talk about?
Well, the only other one I'm working on right now is I've actually been um working with Bring Back Our Beaches, which is this whole sand replenishment thing up in San Clemente, you know.
Mm,
Um, and it's sort of this interesting thing, because it's somewhat of it's been a controversial topic, and I was always one of these guys just like, this is stupid. Why are we putting sand here? It's just going to wash away, right? Type of thing. And but I've been going down this rabbit hole now for a few months, and what is crazy is I don't think most surfers realize just how engineered our coastline is. And the fact of the matter is that we have over the last, especially in Southern California, over the last 50 years, um, we have disrupted the supply chain of sand to our beaches. Beaches are rivers. They're rivers of sand. They travel. You cut off the flow of that river, guess what? You're on the hook to become the supplier. If the supply chain is broken and you broke it, you are now the supplier. Otherwise, your beaches are gone.
yeah.
And so, communities around the country have been recognized this. It's interesting because different municipalities have recognized this long ago. The East Coast is way ahead of the West Coast on this. And one of the fascinating things that I just realized, and most people, I'm actually about to put a piece out tomorrow, today or tomorrow, about this, is that this littoral cell, which is Dana Point to Cottons. So that's like that little stretch of coast right there is is almost like its own little coastal eddy. You have embayment because the headland on one side and Cottons has a left that the bathymetry of the left kind of keeps sand in the deal.
Hmm.
But you also have offshore island shadowing. And so
Hmm.
there's a lot that the sand flow in here, most of the coast it's north to south, but here it definitely comes back and forth a lot more because
Mm.
we're more exposed to south swells than north swells. And so the sand stays in the system a little bit longer. And what's interesting is that between between 1964 and 1970, they dumped almost close to 4 million cubic yards of sand in our littoral cell. And it was mitigation for the San Onofre nuclear power plant construction, which all that sand, when they shaved those cliffs, went to Doheny and then the Dana Point Harbor. And so both those projects turned into giant sand installation projects. And we were living in this off that sand for the last you know, pretty high on the hog through the 90s. This area was had a huge surplus of sand because of that. So my entire childhood at T Street and Lost Winds and all that kind of the pier 204, we were living off of you know, man-made sand. And meanwhile, that San Juan Creek, which empties out at Doheny, which was behind our office when we were at Surfer together, that thing's been completely starved of sand over the last 40 years because where I live now, all this, this didn't exist 50 years ago. It was like it's been so overdeveloped and that whole watershed it's got like 90 dams in it. And
Yeah.
this is a similar story all up and down the coast. And so San Clemente kind of got caught with their pants down because they didn't realize they were living off of that man-made injection all the while that the natural sand flow has been choking. And
Mm.
so they're catching up with that. And
Mm.
Bring Back Our Beaches is sort of letting people know what that deal is, but also this is not, San Clemente is hardly alone. This is, everywhere has its unique
Yeah.
challenge. Um,
Yeah. All right.
Down your way is the same thing,
Yeah.
and every one of them is different. So it's
Mm.
fun getting into that whole deal.
Yeah. All right. Well, this reminds me of like when Barlotti would roll into your office and go, "Hey, I got this great story about sand replenishment." And we would just go, "Dude, you're boring the living shit out of me right now. Are you kidding
I
me? Nobody's going
know.
to read this."
Well, it's funny because, I did this little thing about trestles, and it was like if you look on our Bring Back Our Beaches page, and it was sort of a breakdown of the history of how that creek got moved to uppers, and when they built the railroad, they fixed the river mouth in place at uppers. That was in the 1890s.
Yeah.
And, every single deposit since then has happened up there. And, the whole lower side of the watershed's been dammed
Yeah.
of that deal. It's interesting. It got like
It is. The
it,
railroad's a really fascinating thing because that's what's happened to Cardiff. The river
Cardiff too,
mouth,
yeah. Uh,
Cardiff should be flowing straight out at George's. That's where the river, but it moves naturally. It moves, and it just so happens the year they built the railroad
yeah,
tracks, it
they
just
were
happened
all
to be north. So they're like, okay, I guess this is where it is.
yeah, you drive up from where you are to me, and every river mouth got locked in place on the northern end of its floodplain because they built that railroad so fast right after a winter storm.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that stuff's fascinating because it totally impacted our the river mouths and stuff like that all
Yeah.
over. And those stories are all over the place. It's just like worldwide,
We
and
need a
it's
lot of
fun to kind of
bridges.
look at.
We need a lot of new bridges, is what we need.
Yeah, we need sand too. Um, so anyway,
All
yeah,
right.
it's
Well,
boring,
look.
but it's fun.
Um, Thanks for your time here, Chris Mauro. It's always good to catch up with you. I appreciate wrapping out with you, and I appreciate your
Always.
friendship. I really, um, like I said, I enjoy talking with you. So, look, thanks for being here.
Yeah, Bassy, we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Okay, okay, buddy.
Okay, bye.
Bye bye.